He wasn't a gambler. He wasn't a criminal. He was the head of one of the largest banks in the world.
And just hours earlier, he'd written a note that said, "There is no way out."
This is not a story about a stock market crash.
This is a story about what happens when a country's engine stops, and everyone keeps pretending it's still running.
You've heard of the Great Depression.
Here's something uncomfortable.
Most people think the Depression started because of one bad day in October 1929.
Black Tuesday. Stocks fell. Panic. Boom. Dust Bowl. Soup lines. Misery.
That's like saying a marriage ended because of one fight.
The truth is, the system was sick for years before anyone got a fever.
And right now, in your lifetime, some of those same cracks are showing up again.
To make you pay attention, imagine you and your friend.
Imagine you and your friends are playing a game. Everyone gets a handful of pretend dollars. The goal is to buy stuff from each other. Apples, lemonade, old toys. Simple.
But someone says, "Hey, I'll let you borrow money to buy more stuff. Just pay me back later with a little extra."
Cool! Now you can buy things you couldn't afford before. Now imagine everyone starts borrowing. People buy 3 lemonade stands, 2 apple carts, a toy factory.
And here's the trick. They're not paying with real money. They're paying with promises.
That's not the Depression yet. That's the 1920s. Here's where it gets weird.
Banks in the 1920s didn't keep your money in a vault. They lent most of it out. That's how banking works even today.
For every dollar you deposited, banks lent out 90 cents, sometimes more.
So if everyone showed up at once to take their money out, the bank had maybe 10 cents for every dollar it owed.
That's not a bank. That's a house of cards with a sign out front.
But no one thought about that because the market kept going up.
Stocks doubled, then tripled. People bought stocks with borrowed money.
Yes. You could borrow to buy stocks, then borrow against those stocks to buy more stocks.
By 1929, the entire stock market was a pyramid of promises sitting on a pile of dust.
In October 1929, a few big investors got nervous. They sold. That's it. That's the trigger. Not a war, not a natural disaster, just fear.
But here's the thing about a house of cards. You don't need a hurricane. You need one wrong breath.
Prices fell. People who borrowed to buy stocks got a call from their bank. "Pay back your loan, now!"
They couldn't, so they sold everything. That made prices fall more, which triggered more calls, more selling.
By the end of the week, stocks had lost nearly half their value. Not because companies were bad, because the game stopped.
And then?
People rushed to banks to pull out their savings. But remember, the banks had lent out 90 cents of every dollar.
So when 10,000 people showed up on one morning, the bank had to say, "Sorry, we don't have your money."
9,000 banks failed between 1930 and 1933.
That wasn't a crash. That was a vanishing act.
Here's the irony that nobody talks about. After the banks failed, people hoarded cash. Under mattresses. In jars. Makes sense, right?
But hoarding cash meant no one was spending. No spending meant factories closed.
Factories closing meant layoffs. Layoffs meant no income. No income meant more hoarding.
That's the Depression's secret engine. Fear feeding on itself. By 1933, 1 out of every 4 workers had no job. No unemployment insurance. No food stamps. No safety net.
In New York, children showed up to school hungry. Teachers fed them from their own lunches.
And the whole time, the government kept saying, "Things are getting better. Stay calm."
But they weren't getting better.
Because no one in charge understood the real problem.
The real problem wasn't greed, or banks, or even the crash. The real problem was debt.
Farmers borrowed for tractor.
By 1929, the total debt in America was roughly 300% of the entire country's income.
When the house stopped being worth more, the math turned evil.
You can't borrow your way out of too much borrowing. That's not an opinion. That's arithmetic.
The Great Depression didn't end because of one magic fix.
It ended because World War II forced the government to spend money it didn't have on tanks, planes, and uniforms.
Suddenly, factories reopened. Workers got checks. Money started moving again.
But here's the unsettling part.
The same debt dynamics that caused the Depression never went away. They just changed shape.
Today, instead of families borrowing for radios, countries borrow for everything. Instead of stocks bought with 10% down, houses are bought with 3% down.
Instead of bank runs, we have digital panics that move in seconds.
The names are different. The math is the same.
How? So here's the question the history books don't ask.
If the Great Depression happened because too many people believed the good times would never end,
What are you believing right now that might be just as fragile?
Not to make you paranoid, just to make you curious.
Because the next collapse won't look like 1929.
It'll look like something you almost recognize.
And by the time you do recognize it, the note's already written.